Thank you for tuning in. This is the Rice Crypto Show, and I'm your host, Rice. And today's video is actually part 2 of a series that I'm doing on the digital dollar. This particular video is about something that caught my attention, a rabbit hole that I went down, and information that I wanted to share that I found really interesting. Part 1 is just specifically about the digital dollar and all the research that I found on the subject. So I'm going to have links down below and above for part 1 so you can check that out. And I do encourage people to check out part 1, although it's not necessary to understand what I'm talking about in this particular video. And if this is your first time ever checking out any of my videos, I do encourage you to explore my channel. Make sure you're subscribed, smash that like button, hit the notification bell so you can stay up to date with my videos as they come out. And I also encourage everyone to follow me on my backup channel on LBRY, where I post exclusive content, and I'm going to have links down below. Now we're just going to go ahead and get right into today's video. Okay, now as I was doing my research on the digital dollar and everything that's surrounding that whole subject, I found a really interesting rabbit hole that I went down. I ultimately had to crawl back out of that hole so I can make this video and share this information with you. What I'm going to be talking about is anything, like I said in part 1 of this video, that you can share links for anything that I'm talking about, or you can add to the discussion. I would greatly appreciate that because this is a really interesting subject of the digital dollar. And this rabbit hole I went down is pretty interesting. So you're going to need to put on your thinking cap for this one. Again, as always, educate yourself, do your own research, use critical thinking. So stick with me. I'm going to start off by talking about Steve Mnuchin. Steve Mnuchin is the Secretary of Treasury. He graduated from Yale and worked for Goldman Sachs for 17 years. He became the Chief Information Officer. He and some other people bought something called NDMAC. I think it was a real estate company or something to do in the financial institution. They rebuilt that into a bank called One West Bank, where he was the CEO and chairman. In December of 2019, Steve Mnuchin mentions FedCoin, mentions the idea of having a trackable digital currency, but no CBDC, central bank digital currency, for the next 5 years, as I mentioned in the first part of this video. Not too long ago, he was talking about rolling out regulations for Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies to ensure transparency for law enforcement, to prevent money laundering, and to know where it is going and make it trackable, to end quotations. He also discusses stablecoins to reduce payment processing considerably, and how it would be really effective for small dollar payments for cross borders. Again, in this particular instance, he talks again about central bank digital currencies and said that they may consider more in the future. Now, regarding the central bank digital currencies, check out part 1 of this video if you haven't already. Link will be down below because I go into that in more detail. But I found that to be interesting. Now, so Goldman Sachs backs a company called Circle Invest. Circle Invest started USDC. USDC is a stablecoin. Now, I'll finish in just a moment after I talk about these articles. And again, all this information will be linked down below in the video description. First article comes from LBRY Crypto, titled Coinbase Officers Call for Tokenized US Dollar When Circle CEOs Support. And this is 5 months ago. And they're talking about China and a government-backed digital yuan and central bank current digital currencies that China was talking about. And Brian Brooks, interesting guy. He was the chief legal officer at Coinbase, and it said that he has echoed a similar sentiment by stating that it is indeed the time for a tokenized version of the US dollar. Now, what's really interesting about that is this part here. According to Coinbase's Brooks, policymakers are just now contemplating the question of who should proceed with the creation of a tokenized dollar, the government or private firms. The best path, according to Brooks, is that the country should leverage technology innovations and the government should position private innovation within the financial system. So remember that. And again, I encourage you to read these articles in full. Next article. Coinbase legal chief says private sector should build U.S. digital dollar. Here he is again talking about the private sector getting involved with the creation of a digital dollar. This is reported by Yahoo Finance. Now, as I said, Circle Invest is owned by or backed by Goldman Sachs. And they created USDC. Here's a link for the website for circle.com for their USDC information. The stability of the dollar at the speed of crypto. Backed by US dollars, powered by blockchain, using ERC20 token technology, which is pretty regular in the stablecoin industry. This is some information that I wanted you to go over on your own, which is the reason why I'm just showing the links here, where they're creating a new global financial account built on open rails. It's really, really interesting stuff. And I'm going somewhere with this. Coinbase. So Coinbase, they have an article or introducing USDC on their website. And they explain what USDC is, all the benefits, etc., how to get it, frequently asked questions. So going back to this first article here, in this article, there is a point here where I can't find it in the article. So again, make sure you're reading this in its full entirety. But basically what I'm getting at is Brian Brooks at Coinbase as a chief legal officer started working with Circle Invest and USDC. At Coinbase, one of his jobs was working on the roadmap and development of USDC. Again, USDC is now a joint collaborative effort between Circle Invest and Coinbase. Goldman Sachs backs up Circle Invest. Okay, so the last article I'm going to share, Coinbase's legal officer resigns to oversee U.S. national banking system. Okay, so amid an ongoing global health and financial crisis, Coinbase, one of the most popular cryptocurrency trading platforms in the United States, is losing another key executive. Brian Brooks, Coinbase's chief legal officer, will resign from the company to join the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, the OCC, which is an independent banking regulator operating under the U.S. Department of the Treasury. So now Brian Brooks is working for the government, working at the Treasury. He's taken a role of chief operating officer and first deputy comptroller for the U.S. Treasury. And this is an extremely powerful position. So now let's back up. Let's talk about this Brian Brooks guy. So do your own research on this. And if you have anything to add, please comment down below. Brian Brooks graduated from Harvard. He was the vice chairman at One West Bank with Steve Mnuchin. Okay. He was the executive vice president at Fannie Mae. He is currently on the board of directors for Fannie Mae and Avant. He is the former chief legal officer of Coinbase. He has extensive careers and knowledge in finance, politics, banking, and legal. He's called for the private sector to create a digital currency. He was working for Coinbase at the time. He was working with Circle Invest, that is backed by Goldman Sachs, where Steve Mnuchin worked, calling for the private sector to create a digital currency. Coinbase and Circle Invest team up and partner up, working on USDC. Brian Brooks' job is working on the roadmap and development of USDC. Brian Brooks quits Coinbase conveniently. Now is working for the U.S. Treasury. He's one of the most powerful people in the banking institutions. Does this add up? Do you kind of see where I'm going with this? Using the private sector, Coinbase and Circle, USDC. I'm not saying that I'm 100% correct in this, but it is very quite possible that we could see something like the USDC being used as a digital dollar. I find this very interesting. I found it to be a really interesting rabbit hole when you put together the connections. There's another individual, and I don't remember his name, and if you know this, you can comment down below as well to help me out, that used to work at One West Bank with Steve Mnuchin and with Brian Brooks, and that guy ended up becoming the first deputy. What was the actual term? He was the first deputy comptroller of the currency. At the time, they were going to hire Brian Brooks, but for whatever reason, they didn't hire Brian Brooks, and then Brian Brooks goes and works for Coinbase, where he's helping with USDC. Again, USDC is Circle Invest and Coinbase. Circle Invest is backed by Goldman Sachs. Steve Mnuchin used to work for Goldman Sachs for 17 years. He was their chief information officer. Steve Mnuchin, Brian Brooks, and this other guy all worked at One West Bank together. Is any of this like connecting any dots for anybody? Because, you know, it's definitely piqued my interest. And I think that there's a little bit more to this whole scenario. Now, I try to stay as open-minded as I possibly can regarding subjects like this, because you never know what is actually going to take place. I mean, it could end up that because having Brian Brooks at the U.S. Treasury and having his knowledge, they could just hire private developers and just do their own thing. But with all the talk of what Brian was saying about the private sector versus the government, it makes sense that somehow what Circle and Coinbase are doing with USDC could be implemented as part of all of this. So it's a very interesting thing to think about. And again, if you have any information on anything that I've talked about, please, comment down below. Read these articles in full. As always, I encourage you, make sure you educate yourself, do your own research, and use critical thinking. I hope this information has been helpful. I don't really think it's very conspiracy oriented because there's a lot of things that just kind of connect up, but I definitely found it to be interesting. So like I said at the beginning of this video, with everything going on with the virus and people staying at home, make sure that you're exploring my channel if you're unfamiliar and see what I'm all about. And you can support me by subscribing. If you already watch my content and you're not already subscribed, what are you waiting for? And while you have this chance, get caught up on my content. I got lots of really good stuff as far as interviews, tutorials, and reviews. And I really do encourage people to check out my practice change videos, where I encourage people to be the change that they want to see in this world. And another thing that I would encourage people to watch is my coronavirus vlog #1 video, where I give a lot of advice on how to keep your immune system strong. It's very important. to keep your immune system strong. This virus is not playing, and the healthier you can be, the better you'll be, the better off you'll be, and the more prepared you'll be. So, as always, I encourage you to be the change by practicing change, and I love you all.